Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. We knew the full moon would be a problem too bright, too revealing. Any approach to the marina would risk exposure. The ideal time to board the yacht was 1:30 a.m., but the moon wouldn't set until 2:30, and we needed to be back on the girl long before the local fishermen stirred at dawn. We waited beside the beached Zodiac, silent in our black wetsuits. The moon crawled across the sky, dragging time with it. Finally, it dipped below the horizon, and darkness swallowed the sea. Only starlight and the distant town's glow lit our path. No words were needed. We launched the inflatable. The electric outboard buzzed to life, a whisper on the waves. Slipping from the safety of the cove, we arced toward the headland, our destination hidden beyond. London, lost love found. The hotel bar swelled with people as nearby theaters and restaurants emptied. I sat at the counter and caught the barman's eye, nodding toward my empty glass. He returned with fresh Armagnac. I lifted it, inhaling the warm, smoky aroma, and froze. It was her. Allison. No mistake. I raised the glass in a bitter toast to the man I'd become. The 30-year-old reflected back at me, Jace Turner, 6 foot something of middle-of-the-road, emotionally battered driftwood. Only my mother still called me Jason. I hadn't been back to London in years, hadn't even set foot in the UK. A week ago, I was stretched out in the Mediterranean sun, lounging on the Lost Girl, my 45-foot catamaran moored in Valencia. That boat was my refuge, my home. She carried my wounds. And Allison had inflicted most of them. Only a damn good reason could have pulled me back here. That reason was Stephen. I'd been prepping for a solo cruise to the Aegean. Sailing the Lost Girl alone was possible, but help made it easier. I'd put the word out for crew and found Mandy, 21, seasoned sailor, confident, self-assured. She was living on her parents' 35-foot yacht across the marina. We met over drinks with her boyfriend Paul and her parents. Paul wasn't as sharp, but he knew port from starboard. They were excited, and I needed crew. I offered them both the job expenses covered, modest salary, flight home at journey's end. That's when my phone rang. Stephen was dead. A freak skiing accident. His parents asked me to speak at the funeral. I told Mandy and Paul I'd be gone a week and flew out the next morning. Stephen and I had been friends since school. The funeral was bleak, as expected. I reconnected with old university friends Paul, Catherine, Julia, and her husband William. We arranged dinner for the next night, thanks to journalist Paul scoring a reservation at a trendy West End spot. It started well. Good food, good wine, better memories. We toasted Stephen and swapped stories, our own version of an Irish wake. Then catching up with everything else that we'd been up to. As the meal drew to a close, Julia grasped my arm and gestured across the room. She said, "Isn't that Ashley Bell, the actress, over there?" God, I hoped she was wrong. I turned to see where she was pointing. My stomach turned to ice and my evening to shit. She sat in the corner of the restaurant, the woman's whose face was indelibly engraved in my mind. There were some subtle differences. Her nose looked cuter. She'd apparently lost that little dimple on her chin. Her long blonde hair has a more golden tone to it, but it still flowed down her back. She was smiling as she spoke to her companion across the table from her. He was a handsome man in his mid-30s. Oh yes, I knew this woman. Only when I'd known her. She was known as Allison Peters. Seeing her brought back all those bad memories of abandonment that I thought I'd managed to suppress. I gave Julia a non-committal shrug. I can't tell. I lied and then, hoping to deflect her interest, said, I don't think so. I was lying to her and myself. There was no doubt in my mind it was Allison. I'm sure it is, Julia insisted. I love her films. I'm going to ask her for her autograph. I started as Julia stood up. I watched as she made her way across the room and asked the actress for her autograph. A man at a close-by table half stood, only to settle back down at a nod from Allison Ashley. She smiled at her, and they spoke for a few moments. Julia pointed back at our table. Ashley looked across at us, and our eyes met. For a moment she looked puzzled, then her mouth opened in surprise, shock, horror. I couldn't tell. My feeling of nausea grew unbearable. I stuttered my apologies, and dropping some money on the table, I hurried away. I glanced back and saw Julia looking at me in surprise, and Ashley holding onto her arm and speaking urgently to her. The streets were wet, and I pulled up my collar against the cold wind and rain. My mind was as cold as the wind, and I shivered as I made my way back to the hotel and the warmth of the bar. My phone rang several times, but I ignored it. How do I describe Allison? Everyone already knows her as Ashley Bell, the actress. I gather she's supposedly one of the world's best actresses of our generation, one who had been nominated for an Oscar for several of her films. To me, she'd always be Allison Peters, Ollie, the girl who used to live next door. The girl I'd grown up with. My first girlfriend, and was the girl who'd broken my heart and destroyed my confidence in myself as a man. She'd been 5 when I first met her. We had moved into the house next door, and my first recollection of her was a blonde-haired girl peering over the low fence between the back gardens. Her face was smudged with dirt. She smiled at me, and the 5-year-old me met my soulmate. Another? The barman's question interrupted my thoughts. I focused on him and was surprised to find my glass was empty. Please. A moment later, a fresh glass was before me. I picked it up and swirled the amber liquid around the glass and inhaled the heady aroma before returning to my memories. She'd been my best friend throughout my childhood. Her parents, Michael and Joyce, had become my second parents. We held hands as we first walked the short distance to school. She'd given me my first kiss at my 8th birthday party. I was the only person she would let call her Ollie, and she was the one who called me Jace. No one else was allowed. At the age of 14, she was a beautiful teenager who showed the promise of the stunning woman she was going to be. She was also possessive. She walked up to me at the school disco and pulled me away from the girl with whom I was dancing. She slapped the girl and told her to stay away from her boyfriend. Then she wrapped herself around me, pulling my face down for a kiss that had all my teenage hormones buzzing. At the age of 16, she was the most beautiful girl in the school. She rejected the advances of the most eligible boys and confirmed our relationship at every opportunity she could. Then a brief 18 months later, she was gone, vanishing in the blink of an eye from my world. It had all the elements of a grand Shakespearean tragedy. My grandfather had moved to Australia to live with his new wife. My grandmother had died before I was born, and several years ago he'd met and fallen in love with Beverly, an Australian woman he'd met on a cruise. They'd been in a serious traffic accident. Beverly had died, and Granddad wasn't expected to survive. Beverly had no family, so my parents and I flew over to be with him. He died a week after we got there, and it took another 2 weeks to sort his and Beverly's estates out before we were able to fly home. I had been desperate to see Allison after almost 4 weeks away. I'd missed her so much, and I'd made my mind up that I'd never be separated from her again. Amongst my grandfather's belongings had been my grandmother's engagement ring, an impressive diamond and sapphire ring. My parents had offered the ring to me, and I was going to be able to give her the ring to seal our engagement. We had agreed that we would get engaged on her 18th birthday and marry after we had completed university. Now I had a ring. I wanted to show it to her. I was out of the car before it had even stopped, the ring box in my hand. Then I stopped dead in my tracks. Their house was empty. The windows bare of curtains, and an estate agent's sold sign lay on its side in the front garden. There was an almighty row a few days after you left, Mrs. Carpenter from across the road told us. The police came and took the husband away. The wife and daughter packed up and left the next day. She had no idea where Allison and her mother had gone. Michael came home after a couple of days with a big van, emptied the house, and put it up for sale. It was sold last week, and nobody knows where Michael has gone. The new owners are moving in next month. But didn't Allison leave any messages for me? I asked, barely able to speak as I fought back my tears. No, lad. She got injured in the fight and was taken to the hospital. She never came back here. It was Joyce who came back the next day and packed up the suitcases for her and Allison. What? Who hurt her? I don't think it was that serious, lad. She was holding her arm when they put her in the ambulance. That's all, Mrs. Carpenter said, then said in a SOSO voice to my mother. She from number 45 said that Michael caught Joyce in bed with her fancy man, her American boss. Nobody could tell me what had happened to Allison. After watching me mope around for several days, my father went to Joyce's office and spoke to some of her colleagues. When he got back, he told me, "I'm sorry, son, they couldn't or wouldn't tell me much. Joyce and her boss have resigned. They think the 3 of them have gone to America. I'm sure Allison will get in touch as soon as she can." She didn't. I wallowed in my misery for some years. I sleepwalked through most of my first year at university, only coming out of my shell because of the attention of my flatmate, Stephen, and his friends, the same Stephen I'd given the eulogy for the day before. I had to wait 10 years before I got my first clue as to her whereabouts, and it came in the last place I'd expected. I was 38,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, flying to Canada, and there was her face staring out at me from the monitor set in the back of the seat in front of me. She was the female lead in the film I was watching. I know that given the current culture of 24/7 entertainment news, it was inconceivable that I hadn't been aware of her career as an actress earlier. But in my defense, I have been living on a boat for most of the past 5 years, and as I discovered, she was no longer calling herself Allison. I rarely watched the television, and when I could, only for the sports. The only time I ever bothered to watch films was when I was flying, and then only if I hadn't got anything to read. I'd only decided to watch that film as it was an adaptation of a book I'd enjoyed. Books, music, and the local cuisine were my choices for enlightenment. Not that surprising, as I was a travel writer, and I liked to embrace the local culture. I paid the bills by writing holiday and travel articles for magazines and the Sunday supplements. I paid for the luxuries by being a semi-successful novelist, selling just enough copies to live comfortably on a sailing boat in the Mediterranean. Her face haunted me from the screen, yet I couldn't recall seeing her name in the details of the film. She was the woman I'd loved so deeply that after she disappeared it took me years of therapy to get over her, an attempt to lead a normal life, or at least as normal as possible. It wasn't until I checked the credits at the end of the film for her name that I worked out that she was now going by the name of Ashley Bell, a name that sounded vaguely familiar. I remembered reading sometime in the past that Ashley Bell was an Academy Award-winning actress. The flight I was on was the start of an important business trip, and I was kept very busy for the first few days. In what little spare time I did have, I cyberstalked the woman Allison had become. It took me a few days to locate her. She was in Australia on the set of her next film. I tried to get in contact with her. I guess thousands of people send her messages each year. I found the name of her agent and email contact address for Allison. I emailed her. A simple message where I used her real name and professional one. I gave what I thought was enough details of her earlier life that should have indicated that I really knew her. I gave them my contact details and sat back and waited hopefully. Several days later, I got a message back to say that Miss Bell had read my mail with interest, but was sorry she didn't recall me and couldn't enter into personal correspondence with her fans. I tried her Twitter account and fan site at the same time and was equally ignored. What little hope that I'd get answers to my overriding question of why seemed dashed. It seemed she didn't recall the boy who lived next door to her for so many years. She'd obviously moved on and wanted nothing to do with her old life. I thought it would have hurt to be ignored again, yet somehow, it didn't. I suppose that time had insulated me from my younger emotional self. That's when I understood my feelings, just what seeing her again after all these years meant to me, and the revelation I had only been interested in finding out why she'd never tried to contact me all those years ago. Now, even that didn't matter anymore. Now, 2 years later, after having accepted that Allison would never be part of my world, I'd seen her in the flesh, and suddenly those feelings of loss I thought I was over were overpowering back. All I could think about was to get as far away as I could. Totally irrational behavior, I know, but finally seeing her once more had brought back all those feelings of heartache and loss I'd thought I was over. The thought that she probably wouldn't acknowledge me if I tried to speak to her was more than I could bear. The noises of the bar drew me back to the present, and I drained my glass. I must have been musing for some time as the crowded bar had thinned out somewhat. There were only a dozen stalwarts left. My phone buzzed, for the umpteenth time, and again I ignored it. A voice I'd never forget spoke softly from behind me. "Damn you, Jace. Are you going to keep on ignoring calls from your first girlfriend, your oldest friend?" I didn't move. I kept staring at the glass in my hand. My oldest friend, I said bitterly, would have found a way to get in touch 12 years ago. My girlfriend would have known she was breaking my heart. She may have even considered answering my emails 2 years ago, but apparently, now she's far too important to correspond with old friends, especially one she doesn't recall. "Are you sure you've got the right person?" I heard a sob and felt a presence settle on the stool beside me, but I didn't look at her. "I'm sorry, Jace," she said tearfully. "I didn't know I'd hurt you that much. Don't call me that. Only one friend was allowed to call me that, and you aren't her anymore." There was a silence that was finally broken by another sob. "Jace, I'll go if you want me to. But please, love, let me try to explain what happened." She looked nervously at me. "Can we go somewhere a bit more private and talk?" she pleaded. I looked around the bar. Most of the patrons were subtly, and in a couple of cases, blatantly watching us. No, not watching us, her. I was sure I was going to regret this. Yet I wanted to know why she'd abandoned me so completely all those years ago. I was bitter that she'd thought so little of me. "I can ask if there's somewhere quieter, or I've got a room here. We can talk there if you want," I offered. "I'd prefer to use your room." I nodded in agreement, and she stood and stepped away while I signed the check. I added a generous tip, thinking that at least one person should benefit from the disaster of the night. Turning, I saw her in the doorway that led to the lobby. The man she'd been sitting with at the restaurant was standing by her side, holding her arm possessively. I wondered who he was: friend, boyfriend, lover, husband? The possibilities were endless. He didn't look happy with me, casting icy glances in my direction as he spoke to her. I hung back. The last thing I wanted to do was to walk into a domestic argument. I stayed where I was, leaning on the bar. "You know Ashley Bell?" the barman asked. I couldn't help overhearing the two of you. What business was it of his? But to my surprise, I found myself saying, "I knew her a long time ago, but this is the first time I've seen her in years." I nodded in her direction. "Any idea who the guy with her is?" The barman gave me a surprised look. "You don't know much about her, do you?" He's her ex-boyfriend. There was a story on E! News a few days ago that he wanted a reconciliation. Fine, I understand the ex-boyfriend bit, but you still haven't told me who he is? Shit, you really don't know anything about her. That's Simon Davies, you know, the actor. They starred in that film last year. Lovers on and off the screen, so they say. His name sounded familiar, but as I'd said, I was no movie buff. As I watched, he put his arm around her. She shrugged it off and pushed him away. He glared at me before spinning around and walking away. I guess no reconciliation then, I said to the barman, and he gave a short laugh. She gave me a curt come here gesture, which given my emotional state, really pissed me off. Who the hell did she think I was? Some type of lapdog to be called to heel. I walked away and used the second exit that led to the lifts. She hurried after me and caught up as I waited for the elevator doors to open. She gave me a surprised look. I doubted that she'd been ignored like that for years. One look at the expression on my face told her I was not amused by her attitude. She grasped hold of my arm. Please, Jace, don't go. I can explain, she said. I accepted Simon's invitation this evening to try and clear the air between us. Unfortunately, he read more into the acceptance than I intended. Seeing you at the restaurant was such a shock, I couldn't get rid of him fast enough. Your friends gave me your number and told me where you were staying. You must have followed me here. Ollie, I don't care about your personal life. I do get pissed off when you start acting all high and mighty. I'm not a dog you can call to heel when it suits you. She looked shocked at my statement and then embarrassed. The elevator doors opened. I entered the paneled and mirror-lined box and pressed the button for my floor. The doors were starting to close when she hurried in to stand beside me. We stood in silence as the elevator rose to my floor and the doors opened. She followed me out and down the corridor to the door of my room. I entered the room, and she hesitated in the doorway. Can I come in? She asked. I nodded, and she stepped in and closed the door behind her. I hung my coat on a hook and took off my jacket and placed it on the back of a chair. My room had a seating alcove by the windows. The room was a corner suite, softly lit by one light in the bed head and another lamp by the chairs in the window alcove. Ollie stood watching me move about with an odd expression on her face. I held out my hand, and she slipped off her coat. She was wearing a dark blue strapless dress that fell a couple of inches above her knees. Her long slim legs were encased in stockings that shimmered. Her beauty took my breath away, and I had to swallow hard to try and get my emotions under control. Do you want to sit down? I asked. She looked at me gratefully and sat down on one of the comfy chairs by the window. She folded her hands in her lap. Would you like a drink? I've got a bottle of whiskey, or I guess there'll be wine or beer in the minibar. A glass of white wine if you've got it. I found a bottle in the minibar and poured a glass for her, placing it on the table. So what should I call you? Is it Ashley, or do you still answer to Allison? I asked. I'll always be Allison for you, and I'm happy that you still think of me as Ollie. Ashley lives in a fantasy world that I'm not sure you would want to be part of. I poured myself a whiskey and settled into the other chair. So, do you want to explain why you broke my 18-year-old heart? I was. She paused and shook her head. I've always been in love with you, Jace. After what happened in the house. Yeah, you really showed how much you loved me. I interrupted, then took a deep breath and asked. What did happen? All I ever heard was speculation and innuendo. Mom was having an affair. That's what happened, Allison replied, and she dragged me into the fallout. She took a long swallow from her glass, and I filled it again. It was all so stupid, she said. I was sick at school and needed to go home. They called my parents but couldn't get through to Dad. When Mom arrived to collect me, she was with her boss, Chad. I didn't pay much attention to his presence. I was feeling so sick. After Mom checked me out, I went straight up to my bedroom. Chad stayed downstairs with her. Dad must have picked up his messages as he came home early and found them together on the sofa. There was a screaming match going on, and it woke me up. Unfortunately, I was still groggy, and I slipped on the last couple of stairs. I put out my hand to stop myself and broke my arm. Badly. She shook her head. I only cracked a bone in my wrist. So the rumors were true. Your mom was having an affair. Ollie nodded. It had apparently been going on for some time. I wasn't aware how bad it had become between my parents. He'd been hitting her when I wasn't around. That surprised me. He'd played the innocent party when he'd spoken my parents. They were convinced it had been all Joyce's fault. Dad had come home early because of the message from the school and caught them. She continued. I remember sitting on the bottom steps looking into the lounge. Mom was holding her unbuttoned blouse closed, and her bra was on the floor at her feet. Chad only had his trousers on. They all stopped shouting when they heard me hit the wall. Mrs. Carpenter said you were taken away in an ambulance. Yeah, Mom called one when she saw me holding my wrist. She wouldn't let Dad come with us. I spent the night in the hospital, and then Mom took me to a hotel, and we stayed there for a couple of days. The next thing I know, we're at Heathrow, and we are flying to America with Chad. I didn't want to go, but Mom insisted. We stayed in a cabin in Colorado for the first couple of months. Why didn't you call or write? I wasn't allowed to contact you, just in case you told my father where we were. Mom said Dad was threatening to kill both of us for running away. Bullshit. Why would I tell your father? I haven't seen him since you left. But he lives next door to your parents. None of us have seen him for years. Your house was empty and sold before we got back from the funeral. We only saw him a couple of times. Christ, your mom knew that. In any case, all you had to say was don't tell my dad, and I wouldn't have. Shit. Ollie looked horrified at my statement. I swear she never told me that. After a couple of months, Chad got a transfer to Dallas, and we moved to a small town near Dallas after the cabin. They got married a few months after her divorce came through. She paused to sip her drink. I was told that my father was sending threatening letters to Chad's company. We got a visit from a company security officer who told us the FBI was warning us to be careful. I wanted to write to you, but I was scared. I had to do an extra year of schooling so I could graduate. It was a new school, and it was all so different. Then a year had passed, and you hadn't contacted me, and I sort of forgot. Forgot? You sort of well forgot me. How the hell was I supposed to get in contact? I had no clue where you were. Well, I'm glad it was that easy for you. I cried myself to sleep every night for 6 months. I had to see a counselor for the best part of a year because Mom and Dad thought I was suicidal. Her hand touched mine, and she made me put the glass down. She pulled me around to face her. I can't tell you how sorry I am. Everybody kept telling me you'd get over me. You were in Australia, and then my world turned to crap. How do you think I felt? At least you knew where I was. She gave a sob and tears formed in the corners of her eyes. I got a box of tissues from beside the bed and gave them to her. She dabbed at her face. All I know was I came downstairs, and Daddy was shouting at Mom and trying to kill Chad. Mom was trying to stop him. He just lashed out at her, and then me when he tried to get in the ambulance. I was scared, and I just shouted at him to go away. That's the last time I saw him. I lived next door. You could have at least got your mom to stick a note through the bloody letterbox before you did your midnight flit. It all happened so quickly. One day we were a happy family. Then everything I thought I knew changed. We were on a plane 2 days later, and then we were staying in an isolated cabin in the mountains for a couple of months. I never got a moment's peace. By the time we were settled, England and everything seemed a dream. My reality became a small town in Texas. She stopped talking to take in the expressions seared across my face. Pain and despair were the obvious ones. All I felt was a great sense of loss. What did you mean earlier when you said I could have answered your email? Her voice was soft and questioning. I gave an ironic laugh and then said seriously, the first hint I had that you were still a member of the human race was a little over 2 years ago. I was flying to Canada, and there you were, an actress in the film I was watching. I sent you an email, care of your agent. Want to see your reply? I didn't bother to wait for her to respond. I found the reply on my phone and showed it to her. God knows why I hadn't deleted it. She read it, and then read the mail I'd sent her. She gave me an anguished look. I never saw this. I should have. There is a list of words and phrases that all the girls who deal with my correspondence are told to look out for. Your mail contains most of them. Why didn't you try again? Why would I bother? I can recognize a brush off. At least they replied, I got nothing from your fan site and Twitter account. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Then her voice turned bitter. And I'm damn well going to find out why they didn't forward your mail to me. Now the tears were streaming down her face. Hell, I hate it when women cry. Regardless of the facts, I always felt guilty. I held out my hand to her, and she took it gratefully. I don't see how that it's your fault if people don't do their jobs properly, I said, offering her a token straw. She grasped at it with both hands, replying, I get thousands of messages a month. I probably only see a couple of dozen of them, but they should have sent me yours. She came and knelt at my feet. Her long hair fell forward, and she casually flicked it back with her hand. My stomach clenched at the familiarity of the gesture. I hesitantly raised a hand and stroked her soft hair. She rested her head on my thigh. Why are you here? I wondered. I must have said my thoughts out aloud as Ollie answered me. You were the last person I expected to see at that restaurant. And even though I haven't seen you in years, I knew who you were the moment I saw your face, and I could tell you recognized me. I wasn't expecting the look of pain in your eyes. I tried to call out to you, but you left immediately. It took me a few moments to get rid of Simon and then convince your friends I knew you so they'd give me your number and tell me where you had gone. That's not what I meant, not how you found me. But why are you here? I gestured around the room. Why that simple? You were my first boyfriend and the only person I've truly loved. I don't think I ever really loved any of the others the way I love you. We were teenagers, Ollie. You were my first girlfriend, and yes, I loved you. But that was 12 years ago. A hell of a lot of water has flowed under the bridge since then. Can I ask you a question? Did you still give up your virginity on your 18th birthday, as you said you would? The cherry I promised you? She gave me a regretful look and shook her head. No, I cried myself to sleep that evening, I missed you so much. I was 19 and drunk when I lost it to some stupid jock at a college frat party. It hurt. 2 minutes, and he was done. He turned me off men for a couple of years. She shifted looking for a more comfortable position, so I pulled her up, and we moved to a small sofa. She settled down beside me with a contented sigh and favored my cheek with a kiss. Off men? I asked. It wasn't a nice experience, and the thought of doing it again wasn't appealing. I wasn't the only one. I became a LUG. Until graduation, I lived in an all-female house, and my girlfriend was my roommate. Her coat pocket made a shrill chirp, and Ollie started. She struggled to her feet and hurried over to where I'd folded it over my jacket. I'm sorry, she said. If I don't answer that, we are going to have unwanted guests pounding on the door in a minute. I gave her a confused look. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, quickly reading the message and then typing a short reply. Almost immediately her phone rang, and she answered it. Obtuse. Dorian. She paused and continued. No. Everything is going as well as expected. Hopefully, I'll be staying here tonight. I'll call you if my plans change. She hung up and looked at me a bit guiltily. Sorry, I'm assuming a lot. I know, but I didn't think we were finished talking. Who? Or what is obtuse, Dorian? She laughed. Obtuse is this week's security code word. We use a word you wouldn't expect to come up in normal conversation. If I hadn't said it, Dorian would have kicked the door down. He's my bodyguard. I can't go out in public without some degree of security. He and Petra were at the restaurant with me and are waiting down in the lobby. I sat and looked at her. If I needed any confirmation that this wasn't the girl I used to know, then I just got it. This wasn't Allison anymore. This was Ashley Bell, megastar, and what the hell was she doing in my room? She must have sensed my discomfort and was back sitting beside me faster than I could think it. She grabbed my head in her hands and drew my lips to hers and kissed me. I'm still Allison. You're Allison, she murmured as she broke contact with my lips. Yes, and no, I thought. My Ollie isn't a film star. She was the innocent girl next door, I said. I'm still that person, the girl who loves the boy next door. I've just grown up. I can see that. She raised a hand and delicately ran a finger along the curve of my chin. Do you remember the summer we slept in the tent in your back garden? She asked. We were 8 or 9. We were 8. I remembered. It had been a magical time. A rare, hot, dry summer that had started out with a major disappointment. Our two families had decided to holiday together, a package vacation to Cyprus. 2 weeks before we were due to fly, the travel company went bust, and it was months before we got our money back, so we couldn't afford a replacement holiday. Try explaining that to 2 disappointed children. Our parents did their best and organized lots of day trips for us. One set of parents would take the pair of us while the other did whatever parents do when they have a child-free day. When we got back home after the first trip, Ollie and I found a tent pitched in my garden. Inside were 2 camp beds made up with the bedding from our beds. We slept in that tent all summer. We pulled the camp beds together so we could hold hands while we slept. Innocent childhood love. That's when I fell in love with you, Ollie whispered. When did you fall in love with me? It hadn't been that summer, I knew. For me, that had been the summer of best friends. It took me a moment to recall the moment our puppy love had become the real deal for me. When we were 11, the August Bank Holiday Carnival, I replied. We went to the fun fair, and I got upset when Martin Ruby tried to kiss you. I remember pulling him away because only I was allowed to kiss you. I kissed you and told you I was your boyfriend, not Martin. That was the first time I thought of you as more than my best friend. She smiled. I remember that. I was wearing my first bra, and Martin kept trying to ping the straps. You got all upset with him and threatened to thump him. For the life of me, I couldn't recall the bra, just that she looked so pretty and that she was my friend, not his. I recalled she'd told her bodyguard that she was staying here. I assumed that meant she had booked a room here. It was late, and I had a meeting with my agent in the morning. Ollie, as much as I love having you sitting beside me, I need to get some sleep. I've got a busy day tomorrow, but if you're still around tomorrow night, can I take you out to dinner? I'd love that. I'm tired, too, she admitted. I hadn't realized how late it is. She stood, but instead of walking towards the door, she entered the bathroom and closed that door behind her. I stood and stretched, working the kinks out of my back. The lights of the sleeping city caught my eye, and I stood in the window and identified several landmarks. The view from the 20th floor was remarkable, and there were a few lit buildings I didn't recognize. The London skyline had changed since I last visited. The glass reflected the lights of the bathroom, silhouetting Ollie as she came back into the room. It took me a moment or so to notice she looked different, by which time she'd walked over and wrapped her arms around me, pressing herself against my back. I shivered as I recalled the times Allison had done the same thing when we were younger. London looks different at night, so clean and unsullied, she said, unaware of the range of raw emotions I was suffering being in close physical contact with her. I swallowed and nodded in agreement. Do you live here? I asked. I've got an apartment down by the river for when I visit, she said quietly. But most of the time I'm in the States, in LA. Stupid really, I don't like the place, but everyone expects me to live there. Where do you live? I've got a flat on the seafront in Brighton, but it's rented out most of the time. I live on a boat. She's moored off Malta at the moment. A boat? She smiled wistfully. Can I come and stay with you? I surprised myself by replying, sure, anytime you want. Just let me know when. She tugged at my arm, turning me to face her. Her dress had gone, and she wore a bathrobe. No, I mean, can I come with you when you go? Why, what do you want? I want us to start again. I want us to get to know our older selves. I want you to show me your world and me to show you mine. Please, Jace, I never stopped loving you, and I'm sure you feel the same. This wasn't the time for a glib answer. I remember being in love with the girl next door, but I know nothing about the woman sitting here. I recalled the way she gestured to me in the bar. I'm comfortable with the way my life is at the moment, and I don't fancy trading that in to become some movie star's lapdog. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and shock. I want that boy from next door, the boy who made me feel safe. I don't know the new you, but I know that the Jace I love is still in here, and she tapped my chest. If I'd wanted a lapdog, I could have said yes to Simon and the others. I didn't. I took a leap of faith and asked her, have you got a room, or did you want to stay with me tonight? She grinned and indicated what she was wearing in answer to my question. I gave her a brief smile. Yes, I know you're beautiful, even when you are wearing my bathrobe, but can we take it slowly? I'm not sure how I feel. Can we just hold each other? For a second I thought Ollie looked disappointed, then she smiled. I'd like that, a reprise of our camping holiday. Well, I could ask housekeeping if they've got any camp beds. Idiot, she snorted, then raised her head and gave me a brief, gentle kiss on my lips. I followed her lead and used the bathroom to get ready for bed. I hadn't expected to have company on this trip, so I changed into a fresh pair of boxers after a quick shower. I smiled when I saw her blue dress hanging on the back of the door with a pair of stockings and a strapless bra. She'd only been wearing her panties under the robe. The bedroom was dark, only one dim light by the bed casting any illumination. Allison lay under the covers, her eyes reflecting the dim light as she watched me. I slid under the covers, and she curled up next to me, soft, warm skin pressing against me. Shouldn't you be wearing your Tigger pajamas if we are supposed to be camping? She snorted. Good Lord, you remember those. It's not easy to forget the first time I slept with a girl. I think Mom still got that photo she took of us when we were asleep. We'd pushed the beds together and were holding hands. She shuffled closer and rested her head on my chest. I breathed in her heavenly scent, gave her a kiss on the top of her head, and wrapped an arm around her. She moved one leg, so it rested on my thigh and draped her arm across my chest. Good night, Jace, she whispered. Night, Ollie. I felt the tension slowly ebb from her body, and soon her steady breath indicated she was asleep. I lay there listening to her, trying to get my head around the events of the evening. 6 hours previously, I hadn't a care in the world. Now I had one of the world's most recognizable women in my bed, and I have no idea what she wanted or where we were going. My eyes closed, and the muted sounds of late-night London was the last thing I heard. The shrill sound of the room phone woke us in the morning. Ollie tightened her grip on me as I reached for the phone. Mr. Turner, it's Lauren from the front desk. I have a gentleman who'd like to talk to you. Can I put him through? Sure, I said sleepily. I put my hand over the mouthpiece and said to Ollie, I'm guessing this is going to be for you. She lifted her head off my shoulder. Can you check who it is first? And my security should call my phone. He must have heard her, as the voice on the phone said. Could you tell her it's Dorian and her phone is switched off? I passed on the message and then handed her the phone before wriggling out of bed and into the bathroom to relieve the pressure on my bladder. When I returned, Ollie had the handset tucked into her shoulder as she retrieved her phone from the table. The battery is dead, she was saying. If Jace has one, I'll put it on charge. Can you get Lucy to bring me some clean clothes? All I've got is what I was wearing last night. She listened and then said, An hour will be fine, thank you. She passed me back the phone and I replaced it. Like me, she had an iPhone, so I plugged hers into my charger, and then I instinctively kissed her as she hugged me. Hungry? I asked. Very, I never finished my dinner last night. Something came up, she said with a little giggle at the end. I called room service and ordered breakfast for us. We've got 30 minutes. Do you want a shower or something? There's a spare toothbrush in my wash bag you can use. You are a lifesaver. I'd love a shower. She hesitated and then shyly asked, Will you join me? I hesitated. Was this really what I wanted? Ollie had hurt me once before, and I still couldn't tell what her intentions were. It had taken years to move past her, and now here she was, stirring up memories I wasn't sure I wanted to face again. She reached for my hand, her expression open and eager, and I felt my resolve slip. I nodded, and she gently led me into the bathroom. I turned on the shower, and while we waited for the water to heat up, We stood side by side brushing our teeth. We shared a quick kiss just to test the effectiveness of my toothpaste, of course. It passed. Ollie stepped into the shower first, and I followed. The water was warm and comforting. She looked different from how I remembered her older, of course, but still undeniably Ollie. Her long, wavy blonde hair was piled up on her head, and she moved with the same quiet confidence I remembered from years ago. She handed me a sponge and leaned back against me as I helped her wash. The moment was quiet, reflective more about trust and familiarity than anything else. "I remember you doing this before Sally's 17th birthday party," she said softly. "That night felt like it was going to be a turning point. I almost told you how I felt." "You didn't?" I asked. She shook her head with a small smile. "No, I wasn't ready." We finished the shower, rinsing off the last traces of the past, each caught in our own thoughts. Then she glanced at the clock and gave a quiet laugh. "I'm starving," she said. "And if we start talking about all this now, I doubt we'll finish before room service shows up." I shook my head. This was going faster than I wished or was comfortable with. I pulled away and said, "We can't have that, and I don't want you to fade away." I got out, leaving her to finish. I dried off, trying to relax, and after a few moments, so did my cock. I slipped on a pair of boxers, then a comfy pair of jeans and a soft cotton shirt. Dressed, I sat on the end of the bed to watch her through the open door. She picked up her dirty pair of panties and, grimacing at them, tossed them back down. She gave me a grin and raided the drawers, stealing a pair of my boxers to wear, then slipped on the robe. She brushed her long hair and used the hairdryer to dry it. When the doorbell rang, she stepped into the bathroom and closed the door before I let the waiter in. He set up the breakfast on the table by the window and left after I signed the bill. "He's gone," I called out. Still wrapped in the white robe, Ollie came and sat down across from me. I poured the coffee, and we started eating. Ollie paused with a fork halfway to her mouth. "I am serious about wanting to stay on your boat. I want to learn all about you, and I need tell you what has been happening to me." "When did you intend to go?" When she'd mentioned it earlier, I had assumed she'd been thinking about some time in the future, and then only in an abstract kind of way. I'd hoped that I'd go back to the boat and have time to digest everything that was happening. "I'm going back the day after tomorrow," I admitted. "She's moored at the marina in Valencia Harbor." "Crap, I'm here for the premiere of my new film on Saturday. Would you stay an extra couple of days so I could fly with you? You could come with me to the premiere." I'd seen a few of those red carpet premieres on the television, and also, I'd been to a couple of minor literary award ceremonies. I'd always felt a bit sorry for the poor partners that got dragged along, standing in the shadows being ignored by their important, at least in their minds, other halves. That wasn't my idea of a fun evening. So I shook my head. "I don't think you want me there. I'm not in the mood to play the dutiful boyfriend. I don't want you to play the role. I want you to be it." She smiled and slid down to her knees in front of me. She gave me a coy glance. "As far as I am concerned, you are still my boyfriend. I don't recall ever breaking up with you. So officially we are still in a relationship. I'd like you to come as my boyfriend." I almost had to laugh at the intensity of her statement. She got up and sat on my lap, helping herself to my bacon. Stolen boyfriend bacon tastes so much better," she mumbled through a full mouth. She wriggled around so that she faced me and, taking my hand, slid it through the gap in the robe and placed it on her. She fixed her gaze on me and said after a moment's thought, 12 years ago I told you that you were the only person I would ever love, and apart from a few stupid blips along the way, I've kept my promise. I love you as much as I ever did, and now that I've found you again, I'm never letting you go." She snuggled against me, and then sat bolt upright. "Hell, you're not married or in a relationship, are you?" I never thought to ask. "No, I'm not," I said, and added with a hint of bitterness. "It took me a long time to get over you disappearing. I've had a few casual relationships over the years, but nothing serious." She gave me a guilty look and then settled back down with a contented sigh. I sat there, trying desperately to understand what was happening to me. Was Ollie serious about still being in love with me? Did I want to open myself to the possibility, and then find that this was just a passing fancy, and as soon as she got bored she'd move on again? We were still sat like that when there was a knock on the door and a female voice called out in an American accent. "Ash, it's Lucy. Can you let her in, please?" Ollie said as she stood up and moved out of view from the door. The open door revealed a large man in a suit and a small dark-haired woman in her late 20s. By her side was a medium suitcase which she pulled behind her as she entered the room. The man stayed where he was, but I got the impression I'd just been accessed by a professional, and I'd no idea how I'd scored. "I guess you're Dorian. Are you coming in?" He gave a quick shake of his head and didn't acknowledge his name. "No, I'll stay outside the door. I'll be just there if she needs me." He pointed at an alcove a few yards along the corridor, where a couple of chairs and a table were placed. There were a couple of empty coffee cups. I closed the door and found Ollie hugging the woman. The suitcase was open on the bed and appeared to be full of clothes and a large makeup bag. The woman turned, gave me a quick glance, and then seemed to dismiss me, leaving me feeling like the interloper in my own room. Ollie saw me stiffen, and taking Lucy's hand, she turned her to face me. "Lucy," she said, "I want you to meet Jace. I've known him most of my life. He was my best friend since I was 5 and my first boyfriend. We haven't seen each other in years, and we bumped into each other last night at the restaurant." "But weren't you there with Simon?" Lucy asked. "You know I was." Shithead wasn't impressed when I left him to chase after Jace. I noticed that she was intentionally calling me Jace, keeping Jace for herself. In the same way, I only use Ollie in private. "Chased after him?" Lucy's voice was tinged with surprise. "I had to," Ollie said. "I heard him years ago. Jace didn't want to speak to me. He left the restaurant the moment he saw me, and I couldn't let it in like that. I had to follow him." While they talked, Lucy was laying out a few clothing options, light, stylish pieces meant for the interview Ollie had coming up. She glanced over, clearly expecting Ollie to make a decision. Ollie turned to me with a soft, hopeful expression. "Will you choose for me, please?" Lucy looked surprised. There were 3 outfits, but my eyes were immediately drawn to a delicate blue set. The color reminded me of Ollie's eyes. "That one," I said, pointing it out. Ollie smiled warmly. "That's really pretty, and now it's one of my favorites." Lucy gave a soft sigh as Ollie removed her robe and started to change. "Ash," Lucy began, sounding concerned. Ollie gently hushed her. She picked up the clothing and got dressed with a quiet confidence. "Lucy, you're more than 12 years too late to be worried about modesty around Jace." "How old were we back then?" she asked, glancing at me. I had to think. 6. We were 6, playing in the paddling pool in your backyard. And many times after that, she added with a small laugh. "You'll have to get used to seeing me around Jace. If I'm very lucky, he'll forgive me and maybe let me back into his life." Lucy gave me a long, thoughtful look that made me feel like I was being evaluated and maybe not entirely in a good way. Ollie picked up the final piece of her outfit, putting it on with the same graceful ease I remembered. It was a small, familiar gesture, something I'd seen years ago, now tinged with nostalgia more than anything else. Lucy handed her the dressing gown again and had her sit at the desk while she opened a makeup kit. Ollie was already beautiful, but under Lucy's careful hand, she looked even more polished, ready for her interview. "Is this your usual morning routine?" I asked with a smile. Ollie laughed. "God, no. I've got a live TV interview at noon. Will you come with me? It would mean a lot to know you're there." "I'm sorry, Allison," I said, using her full name deliberately, mostly for Lucy's benefit, to show that I wasn't some stranger. "I can't today. I've got a lunch meeting with my agent. It's the first time I've been in London in a couple of years, and she wants me to meet with my publisher too." Ollie looked a little disappointed and a bit apologetic. "I never even asked what you do. All I knew was that you live on a boat." "You didn't ask," I said with a smile. "I'm a writer, mostly travel articles for magazines and Sunday supplements. A few novels too. Some have done well enough to keep me going." She gave me a curious look. "Have you written anything I might have read?" "I doubt it," I said, scanning the stack of magazines on the desk. Among the usual glossy travel titles, I spotted a copy of Yachting World. Flipping through it, I found an article I'd written on sailing the coast of Sardinia. I handed it to her. She sat reading as Lucy continued working on her hair, and for a few moments, everything felt calm, almost normal. "Is that your boat?" She showed me the photograph of me at the wheel of a catamaran under full sail on the second page of the article. I nodded. "She is. I've been living on her for the past 5 years. It's a pretty yacht." I corrected her. "Yachts are she, not it." She grinned at me, and then reminded me that I'd promised to take her out to dinner this evening. That made me pause. I was beginning to understand that my usual approach of walking down a promising street until I found an interesting place to eat wasn't going to be an option with Ollie. I had a few favorites, traditional restaurants that let me indulge in my Britishness on my rare visits back to my homeland, but I doubted that they were suitable for the woman who was Ashley Bell. I wavered, took the easy option, and immediately regretted it. "Where would you like to go?" "I wouldn't mind finishing a meal at last night's restaurant. The meal looked nice, but they'd only just bought the starters when I saw you." I gave her a dubious look. I wasn't sure I could get a reservation. Paul had told me the place was extremely popular, and we'd only got in last night because of the last-minute cancellation, and he knew the girl at the desk. To be honest, given it was where her ex had taken her, it was the last place I wanted to take her. "I'll try, but are you?" I started to say, but Ollie interrupted me and told Lucy to organize a table for 2 at 8. Lucy nodded and said she'd get it sorted. She gave me a condescending look and then smirked. I shrugged, biting back the sharp retort I'd considered, and said, "I'll see you there then." "No, I'll come back here. Lucy can arrange a car." I felt like I was being steamrollered, and the annoyance must have shown on my face because Ollie stopped what she was doing pulled me into the bathroom, and closed the door behind us. She drew me into a hug and kissed me. "I'm sorry, Jace. I know I'm pushing you faster than you're comfortable with. It's just that now I've found you again, I want to do everything with you. I keep forgetting that this is all so different for you. If I want a table at any restaurant, one phone call, and it's mine. I never have to queue for exclusive clubs, and oh, you get the idea. Oh, I understand. You're a superstar. I'm just a guy with a boat," I said with a hint of bitterness. I rocked back on my heels as she pushed me back against the wall. "Don't ever think that," she snapped. "I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. I made the mistake of not standing up to Mom all those years ago. I should have written to you, or even phoned. And I have no idea why I never got your email. I can't believe I allowed myself to forget you. I was in a spin after seeing you. Everything I'd ever felt about you came rushing back. Why do you think I came running after you?" The emotions I'd been bottling up all morning came surging up from the pit of my stomach. "You hurt me. I couldn't understand why you didn't get in touch. For the next few months, I only ever left the house to go to school, as I was so scared I'd miss your phone call. I would make the postman check his bag every day in case he'd misplaced a letter from you." My voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know if I can love you that much again." She clung to me, tears running down her face. She whispered, "You were my best friend. I was in love with you when I was 10. I broke your heart, and now I know I've never stopped loving you. Please give me another chance." "Then you need to stop trying to organize me. I invited you to dinner, and now I feel like a bit player in one of your films. The last place I want to eat at is that pretentious place again." I swallowed, and then sat down on the edge of the tub. She gave me an anguished look. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take over." She tried to sit down beside me, but I caught her arm and pulled her onto my lap. She struggled for a moment before relaxing and wrapping her arm around my neck. She said in a soft voice, "I'd like to come back here after the interview if you want me to." I said yes, and she continued, "When you get back you can decide what we are going to do. I don't care what it is as long as I get to do it with you." She gave a shiver and stood up. She smiled at me and trailed the back of her fingers along the curve of my neck. "Now, I need to get Lucy to repair the damage to my makeup and choose a suitable dress for my interview. She'll be getting antsy. She hates it when I interfere with her planning." "Wait, just who is she? Didn't I introduce you?" "No, I didn't." She sighed. "You need to tell me if I don't explain things. I'm so used to people working around me I assume they know everything. Lucy is my girl Friday, my assistant, secretary, friend, and she's very protective of me. You are an unknown, a wild card, and she's never seen me behaving like this over a man. I think it scares her." She took my hand, and we re-entered the bedroom. Lucy had a worried expression, which she hastily masked. "What time do we need to leave for the studio?" Ollie asked Lucy as she sat down at the desk for the second time. Lucy glanced at her phone. "We've got half an hour before the cars get here. Let me sort out your makeup." She gave me an accusatory look. Lucy began repairing the damage, and after a few minutes Ollie asked, "Did you call the restaurant?" "Yes, it's all confirmed. A table for 2 at 8. I had to use your name." She gave me a smirk as she said it. "Can you call them back and cancel, please?" Lucy's mouth opened in surprise. "Why?" "Because it's not where Jace wanted to take me. He reminded me that he asked me. So it's his choice." She glanced up to look at me in the mirror in front of her, and I'm looking forward to finding out where he's going to take me. That was a problem, as I didn't have a favorite restaurant in London that I thought I could take someone as well known as Ollie to. There was one place, but it was near Brighton, a good 50 miles away, and a favorite place of mine when I used to live there. It was owned by 2 friends of mine, in fact. "Do you remember Leslie Coombs?" I asked Ollie. "She was at school with us." Ollie thought for a moment. "Was she the red-headed girl with freckles? Quite a pretty girl?" "That's her. She's married now, and she and her partner run a gastropub on the South Downs. We are good friends, and I used to eat there a lot when I lived in the flat." They were at the funeral and asked if there were any chance I'd be down anytime soon to see my godchildren. "It's a bit of a drive, but do you fancy going there this evening?" Her face lit up. "I'd love that. I'd like to see Leslie again. I'll give her a call and see if I can get reception to arrange a car and a driver for the evening." "Jace, you know I said I wouldn't interfere, but would you mind if I got Dorian to sort out the car and driver? He gets a bit nervous if I go out without any security." "A bit," snorted Lucy. "If that makes you both feel more comfortable with the situation, then I'm fine with that. We'd need to leave about 6. Is that going to work with your schedule?" "It would," she agreed, and then was slipping on her dress and shoes. She gave me a kiss, and moments later she and Lucy were being escorted down the hallway by Dorian and a second female bodyguard. The room was so quiet after I closed the door. The suitcase still sat on the bed, half the clothes spread across the cover, a promise to me that she would be back. I found the number for Leslie and gave her a call. It only took a few minutes to exchange pleasantries and to confirm a table for 2 that evening, even though the restaurant was fully booked. "We'll always have a table for you," Leslie told me. "So who are you bringing?" "It's a surprise. It's someone you know, that the only clue I'm giving you. Scumsucker, see you tonight. Oh, and if the car parks full, park in our driveway. I said my goodbyes, and after placing my papers and laptop into a bag, I put on a tweed jacket and left for my appointment. The lunchtime meeting with my agent and publisher went on to the early afternoon. It was a productive meeting as far as I was concerned. One of the independent film studios had taken an option out on my most successful novel, and on the basis of that, I was being offered a new 2-book deal to expand on the characters from the same novel. Back at the hotel, I ordered coffee at the bar and opened up my laptop to check my mail and deal with any issues. My phone buzzed, which reminded me I'd been ignoring the damn thing since last night. Julia's last message was, "Call me, damn it. How do you know her?" And it wasn't the only similar message I'd received from my dinner companions. Julia answered her phone on the first ring. "Jace, how the hell do you know Ashley Bell?" "I don't. I do know a girl called Allison Peters who used to live next door to me. She was my first girlfriend." "Who?" Julia sounded completely confused. "Allison is Ashley," I said. "Do you remember me telling you about the girl who used to live next door to my parents' house? The one who disappeared when I was 17? Oh, she's that girl. I remember you telling us about her." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Did you know she was Ashley before last night?" "I found out a couple of years ago, but it turned out it impossible to get in touch with her. Last night was the first time I've seen her in person for years. She said she was an old friend when she spoke to us last night. We gave her your number and told her where you were staying. Was that okay?" She sounded concerned. "She rushed out after you. Did she find you?" "She found me," I told her. "We spoke and cleared up a few of our issues. We're meeting up again this evening." I wasn't going to tell her that we'd spent the night together. Unfortunately, Julia was a notorious gossip, and I didn't want the publicity. "Listen, Julia, do me a favor and keep this quiet. I'd rather not see my face plastered all over the papers." "Okay." She sounded disappointed as she agreed. "Can I tell the others how you know her?" "I guess so, but tell them the same thing, please." I ended the call with promises to keep in touch and relaxed back in my chair. The waitress freshened up my coffee, and I returned to dealing with my emails. That only took a few minutes, so I Googled Ashley Bell to see what I could find. I hadn't done this since the email rejections a couple of years ago. I was browsing an article when a man in a suit and a badge on the lapel announcing to the world he was the duty manager approached me. "Mr. Turner," he said diffidently, "we've had a request to move you to one of the top floor suites." I gave him a surprised look. I'd made no such request. Then I got a sickening feeling that Allison was involved. Again, she was trying to organize my life. I liked the room I was in, and I was pissed off that she thought I would dance to her beat. "I've not requested a room change," I told him. "I'm quite happy where I am, so there's no need to worry." With that said, I looked back at my laptop hoping that this would be the end of this. I could sense him standing there, not moving. He cleared his throat, and I look up at him again. "She was very insistent that we move you. I've had the room service manager pack up your things and move them to your new room. Here are your replacement keycards." He held out a room card folder. No, she wasn't doing this, snapping her fingers and expecting me to jump. I liked Ollie, but I had my own life, and regardless of my feelings for her, I was sure I was a passing fad with her. I didn't expect that there was any future to this relationship. I was expected to change my plans to suit her. I was grateful I hadn't changed my flight because at this rate, I wasn't going to be hanging around London. "You will put my belongings back in the room I booked," I snapped back. I said I was happy in my original room. "The lady was adamant that you were to have the best room in the hotel, and I'm afraid she scares me a lot more than you do." "I don't need to scare you. I just need to check out and find somewhere else to stay if you don't put my bags back in my old room." I closed my laptop and with a sigh of exasperation, stood up. "I'm going to sign for my drinks then go back to my room. If my things haven't been returned, then I'll be checking out." He looked concerned and then downright panicky as he glanced past me at the entrance to the bar. I turned to see Ollie and her little group of sycophants entering the bar. He scurried across and bent down to whisper in Lucy's ear. She gave him a surprised look and a calculating glance at me. Interesting, I thought. The woman he was scared of wasn't Allison, it was Lucy. I wondered if Allison even knew about the room change request. I paid the bill for my coffee that the waitress gave me before Allison walked over and gave me a hug. I was a bit stiff in returning it, and she felt it. "Is everything okay, Jace?" "Yes." I hung the word out and then shook my head. "No, not really. What did I say about not wanting to be ordered about? As soon as I got back here, I'm told, not asked, mind you, that I've been moved to another room. If you didn't like my room, you could have asked if I minded moving, not just do it and cancel my old room." I didn't. I just mentioned that it would be different not staying in a big suite. Not bad different, just different." She looked at Lucy, and Lucy stared back defiantly. "Will you come and stay with me at my apartment?" she asked hesitantly. I shook my head. Staying at her apartment would be the same as moving to the hotel suite. I had a second thought. I still had a key to the flat in Brighton, which was presently unoccupied. My new tenants weren't scheduled to move in for another few weeks. You could come and stay at my flat. It's not occupied at the moment. I've just had it redecorated ready to rent out again. I offered. She gave me a considered look and pursed her lips. I'd like that. It's in Brighton, you said? I nodded and added, I guess we could take the car to the restaurant and then go on to the flat afterward. Ollie agreed and called over Lucy and her bodyguard. She told them of the change in plans. Lucy didn't look happy, but Dorian, her bodyguard, just wanted to know if the building was secure. I was able to reassure him. There's a lobby with a manned security desk, and the lifts only work with an access key. Dorian nodded in appreciation. That should work. Ollie spoke to Lucy, asking her to go to the apartment, pack some clothes for her, and bring them back here. I got the duty manager, who was still hovering in the background, to bring my bags down, and I checked out. While we waited for Lucy to get back with Ollie's things, we sat in the bar. Dorian and a second security guard stood in the lobby, their attention split between us, the main entrance, and the waiting limousine booked for this evening. The traffic out of London was bad, only easing as we joined the M23 motorway. Dorian had asked me for the keys of the flat so that one of his team, who was traveling in a second car, could drop off our luggage. I'd given him a note for the security desk allowing access to the flat. Ollie had given Lucy a couple of days off, arranging that they would meet up in her apartment on Saturday to get ready for the film premiere that evening. Only Dorian accompanied Ollie and me, sitting next to the driver. Ollie was eager to hear what had happened to me over the years and was constantly asking questions. I was happy to respond, but I began to notice that she was far more reticent in answering my questions. She would either give me the barest of details or change the subject. She would repeat that her life was an open book. The press attention had ensured that. Yet when we pulled up outside the gastropub, the Downs, an hour later, I wasn't sure I knew any more about her than I'd gleaned off the internet, and that had been lacking facts and full of innuendo. The Downs sat in a hollow in the northern face of the South Downs. It was a large converted barn set 50 yards from a thatched cottage where Leslie and her partner lived with their 2 children. The car park was full, so I told the driver to ignore the private sign and use the driveway by the cottage. Samantha, Leslie's wife, must have been waiting for me. The door to the cottage opened, and she smiled as she saw me as I exited the vehicle. On her hip sat Jilly, their 5-year-old daughter. I'd been a bit sparse in my details to Ollie about my friends who owned the place. She'd known Leslie at school, but not that she was a lesbian. I only found out because a very drunken Leslie confessed to me at a party that it was such a pity that she was gay, as I was the only man she'd ever considered taking to bed. Later, when she'd sobered up a bit, she made me promise not to tell anyone. It was a promise I kept for years until she came out. I'd met Samantha when I'd worked for a travel company after leaving university, and we shared the same office. We became friends, drinks at lunchtime, the odd meal, and visits to the cinema type of friends, and I hasten to add that's all we ever were. Friends that were comfortable in each other's company. When I first moved to the flat in Brighton, I held a housewarming party to which I invited all my friends, including Sam and Leslie. They clicked, and the rest is history. No, I'm not the biological father of their children, but I am godfather to both of them. Good you're here, she said as she walked over and gave me a hug that ended with Jilly wrapping her arms around my neck and slipping from her mother's grasp and into mine. Missed you, Uncle Jace. Mummy said we are going to your boat. When are we going? Soon. Baby girl, I said. In the summer? I looked at Sam, and she gave me a nod. I can swim now, Jilly added. Then she looked over my shoulder. Who's the pretty lady? I glanced in the direction she was looking in. Jilly, this is Allison. She's an old friend of your mama Leslie. Ollie smiled at the young girl I held in my arms, coming over to say hello. Jilly gave Allison the type of deep, calculating, nonverbal examination that only a 5-year-old can achieve. It seemed that Allison passed as Jilly held out her arms to her with a cute, "Carry me." Ollie took hold of her, and Jilly settled with a happy chuckle against her. I heard them talking softly, but I was unable to make out the words. Sam took my arm and said, Jace, isn't she the actress, Ashley Bell? I nodded, and said quietly, she is. She went to school with Leslie and me, but we knew her as Allison then. Sam paused, looking intently into my eyes, then replied, just as quietly, her voice sounding worried. She's the Allison that you and Leslie told me about. The girl who disappeared in your last year? The unspoken question was, and the one who broke your heart? That's the one. I bumped into her in London yesterday. It's funny, Leslie always said she reminded her of a girl she knew at school when we saw her films, but as we thought she was American, I guess she never made the connection. We were interrupted by the sound of a scooter driving up to the cottage. A young girl got off, pulled her helmet off, and gave Sam a puzzled look. Our au pair, Sam said, then spoke a bit louder. Look, let me take Jilly. and it's past her bedtime. I'll get her settled down and then come over. Ollie reluctantly gave Jilly up, and I belatedly introduced her to Samantha. The news that our school friend was a lesbian and in a relationship hadn't fazed Ollie except for one point. Is Jilly your daughter or Leslie's? Ollie asked, sounding a bit unsure of herself. Only she called you both Mama. Sam smiled. We don't really differentiate between us, but Jilly is Leslie's, and Luke is mine. They both have the same father. Allison gave me a quizzical look, and I shook my head. No, it's not me. Jace knows the story, Sam said. We can explain everything later, but I need to get this one to bed. She's half asleep as it is. Sam took Jilly indoors, and I led Ollie across to the downs. Dorian accompanied us, then indicated he would wait in the bar for us. The woman at the hostess desk at the entrance to the restaurant smiled when she saw me and greeted me by name. It had been a couple of years since my last visit, and I was pleased that she remembered me. When she saw my companion, her eyes went wide. She showed us to our table. It was a round table set in an alcove, set back from the kitchen pass, allowing an excellent view of the kitchen activity. It was the chef's table and usually kept for friends of the chef. It could seat 6, but as only 2 places were laid, it seemed tonight it was just for us. Leslie bustled over as soon as she saw us. She was a beautiful red-haired woman dressed in chef's whites and an apron. Both Leslie and Samantha were involved in the business. Leslie in the kitchen and Sam front of the house. Holy shit, Allison, is that you? She held out her arms, and they hugged then separated. Hi, Leslie. My God, motherhood really suits you. Thanks, I think. You are her, aren't you? Allison laughed. I'm still that girl from school. But you're Ashley Bell? Allison nodded, and then her face grew white as Leslie continued conversationally. And we all know Ashley is a major film star. So my question is to the Allison I remember, not Ashley. Are you back here to correct the damage you did? Only I saw what Jace was like after you disappeared. He's my friend, my children's godfather, and I'm not going to let you hurt him again. Are you going to stay around longer this time, or are you going to run away again? I didn't know what to say. I'd always known Leslie liked me, but even I was surprised at the anger in her words. She gave me a smile and then settled back in a seat, waiting for Ollie to reply. It took her a moment to gather her wits. The only reason I'll leave him is if Jace wants me to, was her reply. I'm not sure he believes me, but I've already told him that I'm still in love with him. Ollie paused to gather her thoughts, and then said, I didn't run away. I was taken away, Leslie. I didn't have a choice, or at least I didn't think I had one at the time. My big mistake was believing the story my mother and her boyfriend told me, and letting them convince me I shouldn't contact Jace. Leslie didn't look convinced, and I was intrigued as well. Ollie squeezed my hand and said, I don't think I would have been as gullible if Jace had been there, but he wasn't, and everything got away from me. By the time I got a chance to properly think, we were already in the States and staying in an isolated cabin. She shrugged. There was no phone, cell phone coverage, or the internet, just a lake and trees. Oh, and a mama bear and her cubs. I had no way of contacting anybody. Mom said she would arrange for a message to be sent to Jace, giving him a contact address for us, but it appears she lied to me. I waited for him to write or call, but he never did. She saw I was about to speak and put her finger to my lips. I know now that you couldn't, but at the time I guessed that you were so angry with me that you'd not wanted to get in touch. I gave her a glance. This wasn't exactly what she'd told me earlier, but it seemed to reassure Leslie. She sat down, and a few moments later, Sam joined us. Ollie and Leslie had been friends at school, not BFFs, but friends nevertheless. They began catching up, both wanting to know what had happened since they'd last seen each other. You know, Ollie admitted to me. Leslie was the one girl I was jealous of at school. She and you seemed so close. But, yes, she not interested in men, but I didn't know that, did I? Oh, I wouldn't say that, Sam said. I happen to know that he is the only man she's ever considered in that way. We were both put out when he refused our request for some of his sperm. She even offered to let him donate it naturally. It's true, Leslie said with a little giggle. I offered to lie back and think of England, while you had your wicked way with me. I blushed, and Ollie snorted in amusement. I told you at the time I was moving abroad, and there was no way I'd let you have a child of mine and not be around to help raise it. Not that I wasn't tempted, I admitted. Sam added, he rejected me as well, but we got our own back. We made him the children's godfather. Who is the father? Ollie wanted to know. Don't know, and don't want to know, Leslie said. It was arranged through a clinic. We gave them a set of criteria, and we both used the same anonymous donor. Sam snorted, then said, what she's not telling you is that the criteria was, find the closest match to him, and she pointed at me. The meal was excellent, and it was fairly late before we said our goodbyes. I nipped into the cottage and kissed my sleeping godchildren goodnight, and then we made the 20-minute drive to my apartment. One of Dorian's security team was sitting behind the reception desk with the building's doorman. Dorian escorted us to the door of my apartment and then left us with a request that we contact him if we intended to go anywhere that wasn't secure. I closed the door behind us and followed Ollie across the lounge as she moved to look out the tall windows. The view of the esplanade and the shingle beach stretching out to the sea was one of the reasons I'd bought the apartment. We were stepping into uncharted territory between us. Ollie had been the love of my life throughout my formative years, yet we had never truly crossed that final line of commitment. We'd shared many close moments, been there for each other in countless ways, but I had respected her wish to wait until she was ready. I could tell from the way Ollie watched me approach, hesitant and uncertain, that she was also wondering what the future held for us. "How many bedrooms?" she asked pointedly. "2," I replied. "I can take the guest room." She sighed in exasperation and stepped close, looking up at me. "That's not going to happen. I'm here so we can reconnect and get back to where we're." "Reconnect?" I noted, "not hopefully reconnect." I got the impression that it was a done deal as far as she was concerned. My sense of anger rose. She was so damned used to getting her own way. She was happy to run roughshod over my feelings. "No," I said, "you need to understand. I'm scared of committing to you. I'll accept that you had no choice when your mother dragged you off to the estates. What I can't accept is the fact you never ever tried to get in touch. It's not like you didn't know how to find me. My parents still live in the same damn house." "I told you why." Her voice trailed off at my expression. She swallowed and turned to face the view. America was so different to anything I'd experienced before, she admitted, not turning to face me. "Yes, I missed you, but for those first few months there was so much going on, and Mum was so paranoid that Dad would find us that I kept putting off trying to contact you, and I honestly thought you'd get in touch with me." She looked at me, trying to see if I'd joined her in admiring the view and listening to her. I had. So she continued, "I did think about you all the time that first year, but as I got involved at school and then college I was thinking about you less and less." She looked embarrassed at that statement. "How often did you think about me over the last year?" I asked. "Once," she said, "on your birthday. I have a birthday reminder app on my phone, and Lucy asked me who you were." I snorted. "So I'm just a birthday memory." "God, you're so much more." I cried when I realized how long it was since I'd last seen you. Remembering how much I missed you was the main reason I split up from Simon. I wasn't sure where she was going with this. Was I really supposed to believe that I was the reason she'd broken up with her last boyfriend lover? But you knew nothing about what had happened to me. Christ, I could have been married, or even dead. She laughed. "You're definitely not dead, and you told me you're not married." Then she became serious. "I finished up on set last month, and I'd made a decision that I wasn't going to take on any more projects until I found you. I had just contacted a detective agency with the intention of trying to find you when you popped up like a bad penny. I wasn't sure what to make of that." "Ollie, I'm tired. It's been a long day," I said. "I'm happy that you wanted to get in touch. It's a pity it didn't happen 2 years ago, but that's just water under the bridge. I'm going to bed. You are welcome to join me, but I'll understand if you don't. We have a couple of days to see if there is still something there between us before you need to be in London. Let's see what happens, shall we?" She nodded, took my hand, and led me to the bedroom. "What's going to happen is we are going to share your bed, and we are going to do what we should have done years ago." She let go of my hand and made a shooing gesture at me in the direction of the kitchen. She started shedding clothes as she carried on walking to the bedroom. "Bring some water and snacks," she called over her shoulder, casually tossing her top to the floor. "You're going to be here a while, and I'm not letting you leave until we've had a proper heart-to-heart." Given the circumstances, I did what any practical Englishman would do. I grabbed a pack of water bottles from the fridge and a packet of chocolate digestives. Thankful Dorian's crew had stocked the kitchen. I was down on my boxers by the time I reached the bedroom. She wasted no time. Within seconds, she had wrapped herself around me in a tight, affectionate embrace. With a playful grin and a shift of her hips, she gently pushed me onto the bed. She landed on top of me with a thump, knocking the snacks out of my hands and scattering them across the covers. "Christ, Ollie," I gasped, catching my breath. She laughed and leaned down to kiss me soft, teasing, familiar. Her touch was light and careful now, a contrast to her earlier boldness. We lay there quietly, warmth and emotion flowing between us. She turned slightly so she could meet my eyes, her fingers mirroring the movement of mine as we held each other. There was something fragile in her voice when she spoke again. "You should have been my first," she whispered, eyes filled with a mix of regret and honesty. "I broke my promise to you." She took my hand and placed it over her heart. I could feel it racing beneath my palm. "I want you to know me, all of me," she said, her voice steady. "No more hiding, no more boundaries. I'm ready to be real with you." It wasn't what I expected, but in that moment, the emotional weight between us was heavier than anything physical. Then, to my surprise, she slipped out of bed and retrieved a small item from her bag. "I almost forgot," she said. She held her hand out to me, and the small old green velvet jewelry box sat in her palm. I hissed my breath in. She still had it. I'd saved my money, and on her 16th birthday, had given her the gold heart and chain in that box. She opened the box, and the little gold heart sat in the silken interior. The chain looked different as I picked up the pendant. I wore it until the chain broke, and it couldn't be repaired again, Ollie said. I found a close replacement, but it didn't seem right to carry on wearing it. The original is under the lining. The sad, thin 9-carat gold chain, the best I could afford at the time, was where she said it was. The chain had broken in 2 places, and the clasp was missing. The replacement was definitely better quality. On the back of the heart was our initials, the engravings worn to be almost illegible. She bent her head down. I've waited a long time for you to put it on me again. I can't believe you still have it, I said as I fastened it around her neck. It's always in my jewelry bag I travel with. The heart's never been out of my possession since you gave it to me. The sex was indescribable, literally indescribable. I honestly can't find the words to describe the feeling, the emotions, the complete joining of our 2 souls. It was everything that both of us had been anticipating since we'd made the commitment to each other as teenagers. Sweat-covered bodies joined and parted only to join again with cries of pleasure and urgency. Ollie was true to her words. We never left the bedroom for the next day. The bathroom was behind a partition, so technically it was still part of the bedroom. And if you kept the French doors open, so was the balcony. We made love on the bed, under the shower, in the bath, and on the balcony, and a few places I can't recall, before hunger drove us out of our sanctuary 24 hours later. With Ollie walking gingerly, we bought fish and chips from the late-night chippy. Eaten out of the paper as we sat on the beach, they tasted better than any 3-star meal either of us ever had. Lights from the west pier reflected off the sea, and the waves crashed down on the shingle. We licked the salt and vinegar off our fingers, and we both reflected on where we were in our relationship. I broke the silence between us. How do you see this working out? We have 2 completely different lifestyles. Do we both compromise? Or are you expecting me to make the changes? I don't want you to change. I want to be the one who compromises. I'm rich, Jace. I don't have to work again. Have or want. If I was offered the perfect project, I'd give you all the facts and let you decide. So if I were to offer you a project, would you consider it? That depends, she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves on the shingle. On what it is. It's the same one I offered you many years ago, a lifetime of love and the chance to make a family. She rested her head on my shoulder. I think you could sell that proposal to me very easily. There's a price, though, and she waggled her hand in my direction, pointedly tapping her ring finger. I thought of the engagement ring I'd been ready to give her on my return from Australia. My grandmother's ring, the one my parents had given to me. It was an impressive 3-carat emerald-cut flawless diamond, flanked by 2 large sapphires, and was a family heirloom, first given to my great-great-grandmother over 100 years ago. For a long time, I'd worn it on a chain around my neck. I wanted it with me in the expectation of Ali's return so I could give it to her. Now it was in a safety deposit box at my local bank. I had a ring for you. I had it with me when we got back from Australia, I whispered. She lost the smile from her face and gave a little sob. You bought me a ring? I shook my head and said in a light voice, trying to ease her mood. I was a teenager. I couldn't afford the ring you deserved. I was given it. It was Gran's ring. It's been in the family for donkey years. That sounds perfect, she said hopefully. Have you still got it? I nodded. I keep it in the bank for safekeeping. Then I pulled her around to face me. Ollie, if you are serious about all of this, then I will get it tomorrow and place it on your finger. But if you are not sure, or this is just a passing fancy, then tell me to leave it where it is. She took my face between her hands and pulled me close. She delicately kissed me, an act so laced with emotion that my heart stuttered. She drew back and said with passion, I've waited for such a long time for this. There's no way I'd let you get away. I take it that's a yes then. Idiot, of course it is. The music the DJ was playing in the far room was overpowering, and the heavy thud of the bass line pervaded the whole club, even the area set aside for the distributor's party. Not for the first time that evening, I wondered just what the hell I was doing there. I was missing the peace and quiet of my boat. I'd hoped and naively anticipated that the act of belatedly placing the ring on her finger would go a long way to calm the worries I still had. She was mine, the ring shouted. But for how long? The pit of my stomach replied. I was still suffering these swings in confidence as we returned to London to attend the premiere of her latest film, a romantic comedy. The premiere passed as smoothly as any of those events ever did. The audience had been full of the high and not so mighty of the London elite, with a scattering of minor royals. I was deftly shuffled to one side for the meet and greet in the foyer. I was mildly surprised that I was even allowed to sit next to Ollie during the screening, It had taken a lot of last-minute scrabbling from Lucy to obtain an invite for me. It wasn't until the press interviews following the showing that the journalists noticed the ring on Ollie's finger. She hadn't been wearing it when we'd arrived, and she'd only slipped it onto her finger as the film finished. I don't want to get into a press frenzy over us before the event. It will distract them from the film, she had told me in the car when I noticed her slip it off. I don't want us to be a distraction. I'll be wearing it afterward, I promise. I've reconnected with my oldest friend, my first boyfriend, was what she repeated to the numerous questions as she clutched my hand. I couldn't understand half the questions that were shouted in our direction. Yet there was one running theme to them that disturbed me. She was continually asked, when had she broken up with Simon, and had she returned his ring? You were engaged? I thought you had broken up long before that meal at the restaurant, I said in her ear. She kept on smiling and whispered, we were never formally engaged. I thought he'd understood we were over, months ago. And the ring? I never accepted it. Then we were in the car, and she and Lucy were on their phones for the 10 minutes it took us to drive to the nightclub where the after-screening party was being held, so I was unable to ask the myriad of questions that were rattling around in my head. We entered, and I pulled her to one side, finding a quiet alcove where we could talk. I had to prevent Lucy from joining us forcibly. Dorian lurked at the entrance to deter unwanted visitors. Tell me about Simon, I demanded. Were you engaged, and when did you split up? I thought it was all over between you, but I'm beginning to wonder. Then I had a bad thought. Are you still in a relationship with him? No, she said forcefully, holding my gaze. I'm only in one relationship, and that's with you. She stared at me trying to see if I believed her, and when my expression didn't change, she said, I was attracted to Simon when we worked together last year. He was fun to be with, but that was all. I might have let him think I was more interested than I was. What does that mean? He wanted to get married, and I kept putting him off, but apparently not forcefully enough, as I never actually said no. He was nice, but he wasn't you. Somewhere along the way, the press got the impression we were engaged. She shook her head. We weren't. Or at least I didn't think so. So why were you at that restaurant with him? That wasn't a date. We hadn't seen each other for a couple of months, and we were just supposed to get caught up. He'd mentioned a new project I might be interested in as a teaser, but that wasn't his goal. All he was interested was us getting back together. He was going on about us getting married and wanted us to announce our engagement to the press. When your friend came over asking for an autograph, I was so pleased to have the distraction. Usually, I don't like people coming up to me in restaurants. He was pissed off at the interruption. Oh, yes, well, that's as far as he'd got when I saw you. Recognizing you sitting at your table was the final nail in his coffin. Oh, I like him. He's been a good friend over the years, but there just was no spark between us anymore. I just said no more and chased after you, and you know the rest. Ash, called Lucy from the entrance. Ash, you need to get in there. Everyone is waiting for you. I'm running out of excuses for you. Damn, Ollie muttered. Jace, I need to go and mingle. It's what the film company expects of their stars. I want you by my side. I took her hand, and we entered the madhouse. It wasn't a party. It was a glorified press conference and bitch session. I was just a prop for the chief attraction. A prop who was at best ignored, and at worst misunderstood. I must have been asked the same question, or a variation of it, countless times. Don't you feel guilty breaking up Simon and Ashley? They were such a wonderful couple. At least the press were willing to listen to our explanations. How we were old friends, and of our teenage relationship. Ollie tried responding to the questions about Simon by explaining that he had believed that there'd been far more to their relationship than she had. But you were supposedly engaged, they would respond. No, we weren't, just close friends, was Ollie's answer. Then she would indicate the ring on her finger. I'm engaged to Jace, and we will be getting married as soon as we can arrange it. After a while, the press left us for more willing victims. That left me vulnerable to the attention, or lack of, from Ollie's friends, colleagues, and Simon. Ollie's friends quickly drew her into their circles, leaving me standing at the perimeter. I had expected her to keep me at her side, but other than a few initial backward glances, she seemed to ignore me. Lucy came and stood by my side. They don't know you, she said, and they are nervous about what your relationship with Ash is going to mean to them. A lot of them get work on film projects, based on her recommendations. She's already told her agent that she's not going to take any new roles for the foreseeable future, and they are worried. That's fine, I responded, but I hope they are aware that it's not my decision she wants to cut back on her work. All I've told Ollie is that I have my own life, and that if she wants to join me, she's welcome. Is her decision going to affect you? Slightly, but I'm employed by her directly, and she's already told me she'll be keeping me on. I guess my role will change a bit, but I'm fine with that. To be honest, if it means a less hectic lifestyle, I'm all for it. But don't the stories about what she's been up to over the last few years worry you? Her other boyfriends, the party lifestyle? No more than it should worry her about what I've been doing. Allison didn't have a choice when her mother took her away. She's been living her own life for the last 12 years. Am I bitter that she didn't make an attempt to contact me when she was able? I guess so, but I don't know what the circumstances were. So how am I supposed to judge her? I gave Lucy a speculative look, trying to gauge her agenda. It's weird listening to you call her Ollie. I've only ever known her as Ashley. So the fact that she's over there talking to an ex-lover who'd be very happy to lose the ex from the status doesn't worry you? To be honest, it did. Ollie was in the middle of a small group of people. The man standing beside her had his hand placed possessively on her shoulder. I knew he was an American tennis player, and that only because he'd done a McEnroe when he'd crashed out of the first round at Wimbledon the previous year and had been all over the papers. I think his name was Brad or Ben, something that started with AB. She went out with him? Not really. A few dinner dates and a couple of parties, I think. The relationship was in his mind, and the scandal mags, of course. He's not her only ex here. I can see at least 2 others. Then she gestured in the direction of the bar. And of course there's Simon. He's here? I said as I looked, then answered my own question. Yes, I see he is. Was she serious with any of them? Lucy took her time answering. I've been with her for 6 years, and she's had a few casual relationships in that time. I suppose the 6 months with Simon was the most serious I remember her being. But even with him, she seemed a bit distant, and when your birthday reminder popped up on her phone, that was the end of him. I looked back at the group around Ollie and said, so I think it's time I see where I stand with her. Lucy took hold of my arm as I started to move. Be careful. She doesn't like being interrupted when she's talking, she warned me. For as long as I've known her, she doesn't like it when people come up to her at parties. Watch, if she wants to talk to someone, she'll either call them over or join their group. I'm people? I asked. I don't know what you are yet. So let's go and find out, shall we? I moved across the room and stood beside Ollie. She was talking to the tennis player whose hand still rested possessively across her shoulders. She hesitated and stopped speaking when she felt my presence move inside her comfort zone. Dear listeners, next part will be released soon. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.